democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It is 6 p.m. Welcome to Dewbs & Co with me, Emily Carver. Now, is anyone else mentally exhausted by the endless squabbling over Brexit? It seems we're repeating the same arguments again and again and again, just as it looks like Rishi Sunak is honing in on a deal with the EU over the Northern Ireland Protocol. The very same forces that brought down his predecessor, Theresa May, are mobilising. There's no guarantee of support from the DUP. Eurosceptic MPs are more than murmuring their discontent. And Boris Johnson has suggested he could make a public intervention, just as he did 4 years ago. So how does Sunak get any deal past his own party? Or is he doomed to the same end as Theresa May? Should he be, perhaps? Then Shamima Begum, you may remember her from the hit BBC podcast series I Am Not a Monster, or perhaps the front cover of the Times magazine. It turns out that despite the best attempts of her lawyers to present her as some kind of victim, she is, for now, still banned from returning to Britain. A win for common sense, I'd say. Of course, I understand the argument that she should be tried here and face the full force of our justice system, but it's pretty clear that if she knew she'd spend the rest of her life in a prison cell in this country, that she'd never live a free life, that she'd be treated as a pariah, she would not be so desperate to come back. So that's the point, really. She and her lawyers must know that the courts here will be a soft touch, that it will be very difficult to convict her based on intelligence from a war zone, and that she could end up living freely. Then digital ID cards. Tony Blair wants them, William Hague wants them. They say this is an essential part of our technological revolution, that without them we'll be stuck in the dark ages. But what do you think? I don't think you have to be a conspiracy theorist to worry about what this means for our privacy. And lastly, Brits have massively gone off marriage. Apparently, the number of people tying the knot is the lowest on record. Nearly 4 in 10 adults in England and Wales have never been married or in a civil partnership. Is this a worrying trend, or is marriage perhaps a patriarchal, oppressive institution that we should be more than happy to say goodbye to? I hope not. All of that to come tonight on Dewbs & Co with me, Emily Carver. But first, let's get the latest news headlines with Polly.
Emily, thank you. Good evening. And some breaking news that's come to us in the last few minutes. Wales's Six Nations match against England on Saturday will go ahead. That's after strike action from Welsh players over a contract dispute has been suspended. I'm laughing because Emily's in the background waving her hands in the air with great glee on the news on that one. We'll have more detail on that story in the next hour. Let's bring you the rest of the news bulletin now. The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has said Challenger 2 battle tanks could arrive in Ukraine by the spring. He made the comments during a visit to a British Army base in Dorset, where he watched Ukrainian soldiers training on the standard British tanks, said by the MOD to be superior to every Russian battle tank. The UK has already promised to send 14 of them to Ukraine, but Mr Wallace says Britain could offer up additional tanks depending on the threat level and the country's defence needs. Well, the Prime Minister today has said he'll deliver certainty, stability and clarity as he seeks a deal on a post-Brexit arrangement for Northern Ireland. Rishi Sunak held talks with Northern Irish business leaders today, and he faced renewed pressure to achieve a workable solution to the stalled protocol. Earlier, Mr Sunak told the Commons intensive talks with the EU are ongoing.
I am a Conservative, a Brexiter and a Unionist, and any agreement that we reach needs to tick all three boxes. It needs to ensure sovereignty for Northern Ireland, it needs to safeguard Northern Ireland's place in our union, and it needs to find practical solutions to the problems faced by people and businesses. I will be resolute in fighting for what is best for Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer says Labour will support any Brexit trade agreement, but he criticised all the delays, suggesting Tory division was partly to blame.
Everyone knows the basis of this deal has been agreed for weeks, but it's the same old story. The country has to wait while he plucks up the courage to take on the malcontents, the reckless, the wreckers on his own benches. But I'm here to tell him he doesn't need to worry about that, because we will put country before party and ensure that Labour votes to get it through.
Now, Lancashire Police is saying it's welcoming the forthcoming independent review into its handling of the Nicola Bulley case to be conducted by the College of Policing. It's going to focus on the investigation and the search, as well as the release of personal information and Lancashire Police's communications strategy overall with the public. Separately, the police regulator has launched another investigation into a welfare check carried out on Miss Bulley just weeks before she went missing. Her body was recovered from the River Wyre on Sunday, more than 3 weeks after she disappeared. Tesco is the latest supermarket to introduce a limit on how much fresh produce customers can buy as fruit and vegetable shortages are leaving shelves bare. The retailing giant joins Aldi, Asda and Morrisons in temporarily rationing shopping, with purchases of tomatoes, peppers and cucumbers limited to 3 per customer as a precaution. Bad weather and transport problems across Europe and North Africa are being blamed for the disruption to supply chains, with retailers warning the problems could last for weeks. Shamima Begum's lawyers say her case is nowhere near over and they'll urgently challenge today's ruling, which upholds the decision to remove her British citizenship. The 23-year-old, who left the UK to join terrorist group Islamic State in Syria, lost her appeal with her case dismissed on all grounds. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has welcomed the court's decision, but Shamima's lawyers say it leaves no protection for a British child trafficked out of the UK. Ambulance and health workers will strike on March the 8th, with Unison announcing talks with the government have failed. Meanwhile, the Royal College of Nursing has initially paused next week's 48-hour walkout to negotiate with the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay. The government says a 3.5% pay rise is now affordable, but the union wants 5% above inflation. And lastly, the King has held an audience with the President of the German Parliament ahead of a trip to Germany later this month. King Charles, who'll become the first British monarch to address the Bundestag during a state visit to the country, welcomed Barbel Bus to Buckingham Palace this afternoon. The trip will follow on from a state visit to France with the Queen Consort at the end of March, which is due to be King Charles's first official trip abroad since his accession to the throne. That's all from me for now. I have more news for you at 7. See you then.
Welcome to Dewbs & Co with me, Emily Carver. So with me until 7 this evening, my panel, Joe Phillips, political commentator, and Ben Habib, who is a former Brexit Party MEP and the CEO of First Property Group. As always, I want to know your thoughts on all of the topics we've got coming this evening, particularly that first one, Brexit. The knives seem to be out for Rishi Sunak before he's even delivered a deal to Parliament. Do you think he will be able to get it through? Is he sleepwalking into the same political trap that spelled doom for his predecessor, Theresa May? It does look like he's honing in on a deal. Reportedly, he's speaking with the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen. But there are already more than a few signs of resistance from his Eurosceptic MPs, no guarantee of support from the DUP, and crucially, the prospect of a public intervention from Boris Johnson. So, Ben, you are the expert on all matters Northern Ireland Protocol.
No pressure,
now,
Ben.
we want to keep this interesting, exciting. Do you think Rishi Sunak has made a mistake by saying he's going to give MPs a say?
Has he said that? He's confirmed that, has he?
Yes,
Because that was a matter of
that's
speculation. He did confirm that. OK, well, that is very interesting. I'm delighted he's doing that, because he could have done this under prerogative powers. The government has all the authority it needs to change the protocol and, indeed, obviously, in its manner of implementation.
I must just say, sorry, that he has been vague. He said they will have a say. Whether that means a vote, yes, no.
Yeah, OK. But before we go there, Emily, can I just explain why it's important, the protocol, not just for Northern Ireland, but for the United Kingdom. And the reason it's important is because Northern Ireland effectively is part of the EU single market for goods. That means the 300-odd regulations and laws that govern Northern Ireland are made in the EU, and to the extent that they're varied in the future, and this is the key bit, to the extent those laws are varied by Brussels in the future, those new laws and those variations would apply in Northern Ireland. That means, over a period of time, if Great Britain, as distinct from Northern Ireland, doesn't follow those same changes in laws, Northern Ireland floats off away from the United Kingdom. And so governments of the future will have a choice. They'll have a choice between saying goodbye to Northern Ireland because of the protocol, because we haven't followed the same laws, or they will align with the EU and neuter Brexit.
But, Ben, what is the solution? Because watching this whole charade, and that's what it appears to be, a charade going back and forth, we don't ever know whether a deal is going to be made. We're told every day in the newspapers that a deal is coming, and then it never seems to materialise. What is the solution?
The solution is very, very simple. The border for goods should go between Northern Ireland and the Republic, where a border already exists, a border recognised by the Good Friday Agreement. And if Maroš Šefčovič, the EU negotiator, is in good faith when he says he can create an invisible border for trade purposes between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, then it's equally possible to apply that invisible border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. The volume of goods between Great Britain and Northern Ireland is 5 times that of the goods between Northern Ireland and the Republic. So the natural place to have the border is on the island of Ireland. That's where it should be, that's where it should always have been, and it was weaponised, literally, I use the word advisedly, the border issue was weaponised by Leo Varadkar, by the Republic, by the EU, to get a grappling hook into British carcass, to prevent us from being genuinely able to move away and become an independent sovereign nation, making laws for ourselves. They know it prevents us from diverging from the EU, and that's why they've done it. And Rishi Sunak, just to answer, have you got another question?
No, go.
And Rishi Sunak hasn't got the courage to do the right thing. I know that because all the negotiations are taking place with Maroš Šefčovič. Maroš Šefčovič is under express instructions from the Commission, the EU Commission, not to change the legal parameters of the protocol. All he can do is play with the manner of its implementation. So when Rishi Sunak gets up in Parliament and says he's a Conservative, a Brexiteer and a Unionist, he's being economical with the truth. His government lawyers were up against my lawyers in court arguing that Northern Ireland is a foreign country. We've had a British Prime Minister instructing lawyers in court to argue that part of the United Kingdom is a foreign country.
Well, there you go.
Well, you wanted
Joe.
it exciting.
Yeah, that was barnstorming.
And that's something you don't very often hear.
But Joe, I do sympathise with what Ben is saying, and I understand most of the arguments that you are making. But it seems to me that this is so difficult for any Conservative politician to deal with. Does there need to be some compromise? If there has to be a role for the ECJ to continue as some kind of arbiter, is that a price that we can pay?
I think, well, several things. On the political front, I feel like this is Groundhog Day. And as you said in the introduction, you know, it did for Theresa May. Rishi Sunak is stuck with the same problem that he inherited from Boris Johnson, also economical with the truth on so many issues. But I think, you know, he's got two choices. Either he stands up to the DUP and his rebels and says, we're going ahead with this. You know, if you want to resign, that's fine. Go in as an independent. Because I think the other thing is that, you know, he doesn't need to go to the Commons to have a vote. There is no requirement, as Ben just said. There is no need for the Commons to vote on this. But if he's saying, oh, parliamentarians will have a say, and in order to get it through Parliament on what would be a purely cosmetic thing, he would have to then rely on the votes of the Labour Party, which would then make him look very weak to his own party. But bear in mind, and Ben and I were talking about this before we came in the studio, you know, we're 18 months away from a general election and possibly a different government. So
Certainly a different government.
Well, you know, and the DUP, you know, who are intransigent, to say the very least, are getting to the point where they're running out of road, because if they can't come to some compromise with this government, well, the next government might be less supportive. And don't forget, there is huge pressure to get something done before April, when Joe Biden is supposed to be coming over, and that is the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. So there's pressure on all sides, and I think, you know, if Rishi Sunak wants to face up to his rebels, well, you know, then he's got to try it.
There are very many people who would be happy to see Northern Ireland stay within the EU's single market.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
Such a completely different view to you on the protocol.
Well, I mean...
Because they're experiencing it.
Northern Ireland is made up of two groups of people, Catholics and Protestants, and nationalists and unionists. And by the way, not all Catholics are nationalists and not all Protestants are unionists. But there is a division of opinion in Northern Ireland. But the Good Friday Agreement, and it's very important to understand this, the Good Friday Agreement settled the issue. Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. The East-West dimension in the Good Friday Agreement is given that's the dimension between Northern Ireland and Great Britain, is given every bit as much importance as the North-South dimension between Northern Ireland and the Republic. And effectively what happened in 1998 was Republic giving up its demand that Northern Ireland become part of the Republic of Ireland without a plebiscite in Northern Ireland. And what we're having here, what is happening now, is Northern Ireland is being ripped out of the United Kingdom without that plebiscite, in breach of the Good Friday Agreement. It's subject to foreign laws made by foreign legislature, enforced by a foreign court, without any cross-community consent in Northern Ireland. And by the way, the government had to surreptitiously change aspects of the Northern Ireland Act 1998 in order to foist the protocol on Northern Ireland. So the government's got sort of constitutional blood on its hands, if you like. It's a slightly technical area, but in summary, Emily, it's critically important because the EU is going to use this to prevent the United Kingdom from becoming a genuinely independent country. And you said, you know, it's very difficult.
Can I just get you on that point? Because we see time, and perhaps you'd like to say something on this. We see that, the polls are very much changing when it comes to Brexit. People aren't happy with the way it's going. You would argue that that's because it hasn't been done yet.
It hasn't been done. Part of the United Kingdom is left behind.
Others would say that the mood has simply shifted.
I think
that they don't believe any government can make the most of it.
I think the mood has shifted among many, if one believes the poll, amongst people who voted for Brexit. And the real reason, I think, for that is because there was never a plan. There were a lot of slogans. Now, you know, let's not go over whether or not Brexit is a good idea or a bad idea, because people will have their own views. But, you know, the idea that Boris Johnson had got an oven-ready deal, he hadn't even plucked the chicken.
Well, you know what? I have a bit more sympathy for Boris Johnson over the deal, because at the time there was so much difficulty, so much pressure, calls for second referendums. You know, the Lords trying to thwart Brexit.
You're right, Emily. There were, but then he won an 80-seat majority.
And you know, the job of being in government, the office to which you have spent your life aspiring to be the Prime Minister, it requires patience, attention to detail, and dealing with those pressures and saying, we're not going to do it until we've got it right. Now, you know, nothing has transpired that people were promised. And, of course, people who voted believing what Boris Johnson and his acolytes said, nobody wants to be told that they've been scammed.
I think the same thing's going to happen again. We're going to have a bit of a fudge of a deal.
The fudge will be... You're right, there will be a fudge. And that's why I say Rishi Sunak's being economical with the truth, because he's going to fudge it. And the compromise won't be a compromise, it'll be a concession from the United Kingdom. All we've done since we voted to leave that wretched institution that is the EU is give concession after concession after concession. We've had a series of split Tory government, half Remainers, half Brexiteers, unable to get a vision for the United Kingdom, let alone a plan, and simply unable to execute the biggest democratic mandate given to any government in British history.
Now, Joe mentioned Joe Biden. Do you care what Joe Biden
I couldn't care what Joe Biden thinks. Joe Biden shouldn't come to the United Kingdom in April. He should stay in the US. He calls himself an Irishman. We have a special relationship with the United States. The United Kingdom does. We've gone to war on behalf of the US repeatedly. We've backed them up on foreign policy issues repeatedly, and repeatedly they let us down. They let us down in Iraq, they let us down in Afghanistan, they're letting us down over Northern Ireland. And actually, I've had enough of that special relationship. Joe Biden should stay in the US. Yeah,
Wow.
we've got to start doing things. We've got to start making policy.
Is not going to do very well.
What?
I said little England on its own.
We're not little. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. We have the 10th largest armed forces. We have a permanent seat in the UN. We are a proud nation. We're a capable nation.
I'm enjoying this boosterism. Let's go to see what people at home are thinking. Jason says Brexit is the best thing we've ever done. OK, to the point. Doesn't address the Northern Ireland Protocol point, though, so get back in touch on that one. Richard says, I didn't and don't want to deal on anything relating to Europe. That's the question again of a hard Brexit versus a soft Brexit. He just doesn't want to deal. He doesn't want to deal with anything with the EU.
But you know,
Rishi Sunak, is it?
there is only one form of Brexit, and that's for the entire United Kingdom to leave all the...
Yes, but it's rather more complex because of the island of Ireland.
No, but it isn't. They've made it complex. They've allowed it to become complex.
But Ben, there is a lot of truth in what I've said, that Boris Johnson lied.
I wouldn't dispute that for a second.
And, you know, because there was no attention to detail, and because, you know, he wasn't willing to listen to say, but hang on, if you do this, this will happen. And we saw that throughout his time in government and the people around him. Had there been a different Prime Minister, you know, whether it was Theresa May, whether it was David Cameron, whether it was, God help us, Liz Truss, you know, we'd have probably been... Lord knows where we'd have been.
Joe, may I just ask you one thing? I mean, how damaging is it for Rishi Sunak if he only manages to get this passed with the help of Keir Starmer, who, of course, was a massive campaigner?
Absolutely.
That would be the end of Rishi Sunak.
But that's my point, because, you know, if he is saying... you know, he's now, and Keir Starmer has backed him into a corner, quite cleverly, by saying, we'll support you because we want to get this done and move on and blah-de-blah-de-blah. Rishi Sunak doesn't need to have a vote, so he doesn't need the support of the Labour Party. But unless he is prepared to stand up to his own rebels...
The really important constituency
some
here...
people will think you're one of the headbangers.
I'm not a headbanger.
Right? Some people will think, you know, Ben Habib, he needs to just learn to compromise. He can't have everything his own way.
So the way...
his own way, you know, that's what some people might be thinking.
David Cameron, when he was arguing for Remain, said, if you vote to leave, the United Kingdom will leave the EU customs union. It will leave the EU single market. We haven't done that. Boris Johnson's page 5, Tory Party Manifesto 2019 states the country will leave the EU as one United Kingdom. We haven't done it. The problem isn't with Brexit. The problem is with a Tory party which is unable to give effect to the mandate that they were given in 2016 because they're riven with division.
And they should have thought about it before they embarked on the referendum. David Cameron went into the referendum because he was terrified of UKIP, and he didn't think about the consequences. He didn't put in place what he was recommended to do, which was to have a 10% difference. He ignored all the advice.
Well, we are where we are, though,
and
Jo.
we are where we are. So we have to make it work. So that's why, you know, at some point, somebody's going to have to compromise, and it's either the Conservative Party, on which Ben and I completely agree that they're hopeless, by and large, but from different sides of the political fence, and Rishi Sunak has either got to be bold enough to face down his rebels, or
the problem, by the way, are not his rebels. The problem the problem is the DUP, and I hope the DUP will stay firm because he can get it through Parliament, he can get the deal going. But if Stormont doesn't start working again, it'll be pretty clear that the deal's a bad deal. And I hope Sir Geoffrey will analyse this deal dispassionately, with wet towel over his head, and make the right decision. Make the right decision. It's a good image, that. Make the right decision for the union.
People are very much enjoying your gusto, Ben Habib. And Rich has said, 2 A-lister panellists, what a treat. Classy, civilised debate, a joy to watch and listen to. Well, that's rather nice.
Thank you. Keep the cheque will be in the post.
Thanks, Mum. Keep the messages coming through. There are very many. Coming up, former rivals Tony Blair and William Hague team up to push for digital IDs. Are you on board with the idea? Stay tuned.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pearce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Emily Carver, and with me until 7, my panel, Joe Phillips, political commentator, and Ben Habib, former Brexit Party MEP and CEO of First Property Group, and not at all a headbanger.
Not a headbanger.
Not a
headbanger.
Very much there are lots of fans, so don't worry.
I value the few brain cells I've got.
Well, let's get some more responses on the whole question of the Northern Ireland Protocol and whether Sunak can be trusted, whether he will be able to get a deal across the line on the Northern Ireland Protocol. I hope so. Anyway, Ken says, no subservience to the EU in any way, shape or form has always been my motto and remains so, and includes no interference from European judges. The Brexit I voted for has not been delivered to date, and I do not support throwing Northern Ireland to the wolves. Well,
good man.
Chimes with Ben.
Quite right.
Steve says Sunak can't be trusted and is just tinkering around the edges whilst trying to con us. The only way this can be resolved is to rip up the treaty or invoke Article 16. John's also mentioned why we never hear about using Article 16. Quick one on that.
Well, I mean, it's a good point. Boris Johnson said he was going to bring the internal market bill new to the protocol. That didn't happen. Then they had the command paper in July 2021 saying how they're going to take back control for Northern Ireland. That didn't happen. Then Lord Frost said in September 2021 the conditions exist to invoke Article 16. If the conditions exist, actually you're obliged to invoke Article 16 because the conditions are basically a recognition that Northern Ireland is suffering. So as a government, they're in fact been obliged to invoke Article 16 since September 2021, and they haven't done it.
There's a pattern of lots and lots
There's a
of
pattern.
empty rhetoric.
Empty rhetoric, and it's the same, I'm going to change the subject, but it's the same rhetoric you see about stopping the boats. It's all about, you know, we'll get the Nationality and Borders Bill into an act, then we're going to get the Rwandan plan, now we're going to kick the ECHR out.
We've got to end the conversation on Brexit, although we could do the whole show on Brexit, I imagine. I would like to see you go head-to-head with a certain daytime radio presenter. I don't think he would stand a chance.
On LBC?
I don't know if... Yes, perhaps.
Yeah.
perhaps on there. Anyway, for digital ID cards, former rivals Sir Tony Blair and Lord Hague of Richmond, or William Hague, as he's more commonly known, have teamed up to push for digital IDs for every British citizen. The former Prime Minister and leader of the opposition say the British state is in need of a technology revolution. The IDs would incorporate passports, driving licences, tax records, qualifications and certification of one's right to work in the UK. Would this be a step forward or a step towards authoritarianism? I don't know what you think. What do you think?
Right, first of all, I think the idea of compulsory ID cards is an absolute anathema.
So a physical card?
Anything. Okay. Anything that is compulsory, I think, is wrong. However, I do think, and this is one part of a very extensive and well-thought-out report from Hague and Blair, which is about why we are struggling behind in technology. Now, many people use their phones entirely. They don't carry any cash. They use it for everything from car parking to making the hospital or doctor's appointments to booking holidays to absolutely everything. There are lots of areas where it would make sense for there to be a link-up. And I will give you an example, Emily. Power of attorney, which I'm sure many of the viewers and listeners have got for their elderly relatives or partners or whatever. It's a very laborious, quite rightly so, process. But once you've got it, and I have been dealing with this because my father died last year and my mother has got Alzheimer's, I've had to send off the physical document so many times to the Inland Revenue, to banks, to so on and so forth. Now, you would think...
I know from family experience how laborious it is.
And actually, it takes a long time. So you would think something as simple as that, once it's gone through the process and is registered, that HMRC would be able to link up to the Office of the Legal Guardian to check that that exists and everything's in order. So there are things like that where it makes common sense. There are things like the health service. Now, bear in mind that Tony Blair had a great idea to digitise the health service, wasted £10 billion on a system that didn't work. But, you know, why have we got letters still going out by post that people don't get because the post is unreliable or whatever, they miss the appointments and so on and so forth. If you do something dealing with your local council, most of it is digital. Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute that there are many people who can't or don't choose to go online to do stuff, and we need to make sure that those people are able to access the same as other people.
You say that, but I think they are forgotten.
They are forgotten.
Banking.
But you see, there are lots and lots of things where, for instance, all local authorities have to do a resident survey every year. What do they do with that data? Various councils have different ways of using it. But if you are going to skin that data properly and use it, you would then be able to say, here's an area where there is really poor broadband, so let's make sure any public meetings or consultations are held in those areas.
Well, Joe, you sound completely reasonable with all of that, and very rational. But Ben, is not what Joe's saying sort of first step towards digital ID cards?
Well, I'm wholly against digital ID cards. You know, Tony Blair has form for this. You might recall in 2005 he wanted to introduce an ID card. And in fact, an Act of Parliament was passed in order to introduce ID cards, which was only reversed by the Conservative and Liberal coalition government when they won the election in 2010. And those cards, he said, would be fantastic because you'd be able to have facial recognition, fingerprints, you'd be able to identify yourself, you know, in short order. Then during lockdowns and the vaccination programme, he wanted the vaccination passport. And now he wants this, and he's selling it through the prism of technological advancement. But on these cards, he wants your passport, your tax returns, your national insurance number, and a whole host of other sensitive information. And where Tony Blair is coming from is big state interventionist. That's what Tony Blair is. Tony Blair launched what now is a wet nurse, but started off as a nanny state. And so this is vintage Tony Blair. He thinks the state can do everything. And I see it as really pernicious. I'm surprised that Lord Hague would put his name to it. It's quite a testimony to where the Conservative Party and Conservative thinking has gone, that it would support an initiative like this. And all credit to David Cameron for having got rid of that act back in 2010.
That sort of issue very much splits the Libertarians from the small C Conservatives, I would say.
But I think, you know, there are ways of doing. There are ways of.
It does sound like Tony Blair wants to be, the leader of the world.
He does.
Anybody who sets up their own global institute probably does think they need.
Yes, quite.
And I think there is a danger, as one commentator wrote today, that these are men coming to technology in late middle age going, isn't this exciting? I didn't know I could make this.
Oh, no, Tony Blair's been at this for years.
But I do think there are ways where technology can actually help people. I mean, one instance is with elderly people being assessed to go home from hospital. We know there are people in hospital who don't need to be in hospital, but they haven't got the care at home.
But that's different, isn't it, from having one card or one thing that has absolutely everything
on
about
it.
you.
But I think, that's what I said at the beginning, that this is the headline that's been plucked out of it because they know, obviously, journalists know that this is the thing.
People.
Well, and people will discuss it. It'll be on phone-ins around the country, for the next few days. The other things that are in here, though, I think are really valid, and you will know this, Ben, from your dealings in property. In order to have lab space, you can't just convert offices. You do need to have a whole set of different planning permissions and rules and regulations. And one of the things that they've said in this paper is that process needs to be speeded up, which I think is something that is worth looking at, because you can't just convert an empty department store into a laboratory. There needs to be lots of things.
So why can't they just talk about those kind of things and not go the whole hog and make suggestions that sound so authoritarian?
Because that's the sexy bit that comes out. You can't imagine a headline and us talking about,
but how do you know that? How do you know that's not the cuckoo's egg in the nest?
Well, I know, but it has a conversation. But look, I mean, I can give you a million examples. Why would a woman who has had a full hysterectomy be called for a cervical smear test? There is no point.
Yeah, sure, but that's just IT departments haven't got their act together.
Yes, but that is the point, isn't it? That if you haven't got the linked up...
Sure, we need technological advancement, agreed.
And if you've got, people who are not, whether physical or technology, if you haven't got stuff that marries up and talks to each other, we're going to end up in this nonsense, which makes people think, for goodness sake.
I think, you know, there's some truth to what you're saying, definitely. It sounds quite sensible, but Mike...
Good Lord, you say that rather begrudgingly.
No, because I'm very sceptical of all of this sort of digital collating of all of our information. I worry, well, not least because the tech can go down.
Well, I know.
You know, there could be major hackings. You don't know what the data's going to be used
we haven't
for.
even touched on that.
There are, you know, there are many issues, of course, and there are issues of security, there are issues of scammers, there are issues of hackers.
And control.
All of that.
And control.
Who's got that
You never know what government is going to be elected. Anyway, we've got lots of comments coming through on this. Mike says,
told us.
those who think ID cards will rob them of their freedoms are living in cloud cuckoo land. It would be true for those who don't have a driver's licence, bank card, social media account, internet browser, mobile phone or NHS account. We are all digitally mapped in great detail, and we do it because we get huge benefits in return. Well, that's one point of view. But Susan says, I will not be on board with anything Blair proposes. Absolutely
I think that's
nothing.
a very sound policy by which to govern your life. If Blair says it, don't do it.
I mean, you could probably follow that most of the time. Anyway, that's all we've got time for on that discussion. But coming up, Shamima Begum loses her appeal against the decision to revoke her British citizenship. But it won't be the end of the road. Stay tuned.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewbs, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Emily Carver, and with me until 7 o'clock, my panel, Joe Phillips is a political commentator, and Ben Habib, former Brexit Party MEP and the CEO of First Property Group. So, a court has dismissed Shamima Begum's appeal against the decision to revoke her citizenship. This despite credible suspicion she was trafficked into ISIS territory. Begum was stripped of her citizenship in 2019 and remains in a Syrian refugee camp. The Home Office says its priority is the safety and security of the UK, but Shamima's lawyers warn the legal fight is nowhere near over. They say there's endless legal challenges that could still be made. Ben, do you think this was the right decision, or should she have been brought back here for trial?
Well, I mean, I haven't looked at the case detail, but it seems to me that it's the right decision. She was stripped of her nationality in 2019. She went through a court process then. It went all the way to the Supreme Court that ruled that she shouldn't have her citizenship reinstated, and for reasons that are not entirely clear, she's now had the opportunity to go through that legal process again, and she's gone through this special immigration appeals commission. And I suspect this is going to end up where so many of these things end up, which is a European Court of Human Rights. And there'll be viewers who will be rolling their eyes at the screen like, oh, not the ECHR again. But I think this is going to head back there. And what would happen if the European Court of Human Rights finds in her favour? That would be quite an interesting political impact, wouldn't it? The government would have to wake up. It would have huge political impact. But the real takeaway for me on the Shamima Begum story is this is a woman who's not even in the United Kingdom, but can pull the levers of our legal system so effectively. She's actually had 5 hearings, one way or another, on the same issue. Can you imagine what it's like for people who actually do make that illegal crossing from the Channel in our land? Let's hypothetically say she'd made that illegal crossing in a boat and she was here. Even having now had 5 court cases go against her, we wouldn't have the right to deport her because there's nowhere to send her. She's stateless.
It is bizarre, Joe, isn't it, that she's able to appeal?
No, I think that's, that's the law running its course. I think
Is it? Because it seems to a lot of people that it's constant activist lawyers trying to find loopholes and loopholes. And I do wonder, why are there so many people who want to fight tooth and nail for this now woman who joined a terrorist organisation?
Well, I think, there are several issues here. One is that I think the ruling today, which upheld the then Home Secretary Sajid Javid's decision to strip her of her British citizenship, and that's all that hearing was about. The people who want her to come back and face trial, for what?
Well, this is the problem.
I know, exactly. So, I mean, I think that this whole thing gets conflated. So, bring her back, let her face justice. Well, what are you going to charge?
But she hasn't been stripped of her citizenship for a crime. It's the threat she poses to the United Kingdom.
And that's why it was upheld that the Home Secretary had every right to put British security above and beyond her rights as a British citizen. Also, she does have a right to Bangladeshi citizenship, so she is not technically stateless. I think it would have been a slightly different question had any of her 3 children survived, because where would those children fit as stateless individuals? Would they have any rights to be British citizens? Or would they, have any rights to come back and be repatriated with their grandparents?
Social services may wish to strip of her children.
Well, yes,
for good reason.
I think having lost 3 children to death, I think that doesn't need to go down that route.
This is what's so frustrating, though, about the argument that we hear time and time again when this story comes back into the news, that the lawyers they know that if she was brought back to this country, that she wouldn't necessarily be convicted of a crime.
She wouldn't be convicted of a crime, and even if a court found that she should be deported, there'd be nowhere to deport her to. Once she's back here, that's why they're fighting so hard. Once she's back here, she's in.
But why do they want...
Because...
There's money in it, Emily.
There's money in it, yes.
Hang on a minute, hang on. Just because you don't agree with the position that a lawyer is taking... I mean, Gareth Pearce, who is one of Shamima Begum's lawyers today, is actually a renowned lawyer who got justice for people who were wrongly jailed for very, very, very many years for bombings that they had no part in. So, it depends. Just because we think, or other people might think Shamima Begum is a terrorist threat, she is still entitled to have somebody acting on her behalf to argue against it.
Sure. I guess a lot of people would take the view that the Home Office, the Home Secretary, knows the intelligence, knows the facts,
and that's what the court
and that she's a national security.
And that's what the court has
and it's been to the Supreme Court already.
Well, quite. We shall see what happens. I imagine more and more legal challenges is what we've got coming. So we've got some responses coming through. Colin says, if you're proud of this country and its history, then you will know that this lady must be brought home and tried for joining an illegal organisation. She must not be allowed to stay in Syria, where she might try to spread ISIS propaganda. We've never left our mess on someone else's doorstep. I'm not sure if that last bit's true, but you make the point that many people have made that she should come back here for trial, but perhaps we need some kind of new treason law. Perhaps we need some kind of new treason law.
She was 15 when she left, so what she would be charged as a juvenile? I mean, I think, you know, there's an awful lot of barroom lawyers out there.
Yeah.
Stop and think about what you would charge her with.
Well, I think treason. Anyway, coming up. Is marriage over? Is it even important anymore? The Office for National Statistics says fewer and fewer people are doing it. We'll find out what the panel think in just 2 secs.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Emily Carver. And with me until 7, my panel is still here. Joe Phillips, political commentator, and Ben Habib, who is former Brexit Party MEP and the CEO of First Property Group. So, I just recently got engaged. And thank you. And I read in the newspaper today that apparently marriage is on the way out. Do you think marriage is the foundation of any successful society and the cornerstone of a thriving economy? Or perhaps you think it's an outdated institution that has served its purpose. Does marriage even matter anymore? The Office for National Statistics shows fewer and fewer people are tying the knot. Ben?
Well, I have to say, I was over the moon when I heard you were getting married. So there must be something, there must be an emotional disposition within me towards marriage, because I see it as a kind of happy transition from being a young single person to embarking on a journey with someone you love, setting up a family, creating your own little institution, if you like. And from that perspective, I think it's wonderful. And, you know, if you look at how society has evolved, you know, family units are terribly important. That's where children learn their value systems. That's where they learn maths. That's where they learn English, how to speak, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, I see the unit of a family is really important. And I think the structure of marriage helps that unit. It, you know, binds you. It's a public declaration of commitment to each other, rather than a kind of laissez-faire. Well, you look, you know, pretty good to me, so let's have some children.
I'm going to call you out on this, Ben.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because a few weeks ago we were discussing with Michelle about the Church of England's decision on same-sex marriages
and refusing to adjudicate them.
To perform the ceremony.
Perform them, yeah.
Yeah, but to offer blessings and things. And you said, why does it matter? But you've just argued very convincingly and articulately as why it does matter to some people to do that public witness and declaration.
Yeah, but they can do that. I mean, same-sex marriages can do that in a registry office, can't they?
But, you know, if you're, it's a personal choice.
No, but I mean, it's not compliant with Christianity, is it? I mean, are we going back to that debate?
Let's not have that.
Let's not have
Well,
that.
I mean, Kate Forbes, we had a bit of that debate yesterday talking about Kate Forbes, the SNP leadership candidate.
And I quite like Kate Forbes, even though she's SNP. I mean, she's got some good, sound, traditional, conservative Christian values.
Respects marriage. David has messaged me asking me if I will marry him.
Bit late now, David.
Too late.
Yeah, you got there.
The ring.
You got there a bit too late. I'm sorry, but I'm sure you'll find someone lovely. And Kathy says, I believe marriage should stay. I've been married to my childhood sweetheart for 52 years, and we've both never regretted it for a second. Oh, that's very sweet.
But you don't have to get
I hope
married.
I'm like that.
And all I would say to you, Emily, as I'm sure you embark on the planning for this marvellous wedding, and you will be having voices in your head from everybody telling you what to do.
Yeah.
Marriage is about more than the day. It's not just a dress and flowers. Nobody's going to remember whether the serviettes matched the flowers or what they had to eat. But you will have gone through agony. You'll have fallen out with your mother, your best friend, your bridesmaids, probably nearly called it off with your fiancé. Marriage is more than the day, and that's what people need to remember.
You know what? Sometimes I think I'd rather just skip the day and get to the marriage, but perhaps that's a bit of a miserable point.
No, you've got to have the day. Come on, you've got to have the day. It's the fun part.
He said it's not worth the paper it's written on, marriage, that is.
Who said that? Lee?
Lee
No,
said
he's not. That's not right.
Yeah, miserable
That's
Lee.
not right.
Lee. You didn't give us any details of your situation, so we can't judge why you're saying that.
It's not an easy institution, marriage. You know, it is one hell of a long journey that you've got ahead of you if it works out.
But don't forget, we were looking this up, actually. It's legal, not religious. The whole institution of marriage is a legal...
It's a legal construct, absolutely.
So it's a legal construct.
Born, perhaps, out of religion. But
the religious ceremonies of whatever religion you happen to believe in. But it is also, you know, something that, in the past, was about the ownership of a woman passing from a father to the man, her husband.
This is the patriarchal.
Exactly.
This is what people say about marriage. I was listening to Peter Tatchell the other day, and he was saying how he would never get married, but obviously he was talking about equal marriage, but that he considers it a patriarchal, oppressive institution, but he will always support people's rights to get married if they want to. But it is a bit strange that nearly 4 in 10 adults have never been wed. That is very much...
But it doesn't mean to say that they're not in a relationship.
No, but I do think a lot of people are single for longer anyway, not even in a relationship.
Yeah,
Anyway, that is all we've got. Lots to ponder there this evening. Thank you very much indeed. That's all we've got time for this evening on Dewbs & Co. I will be back on Saturday, 2 till 4 p.m. for Real Britain. Nana will be taking the presenter's seat tomorrow. Thank you very much to my panel, Ben Habib
Thank you.
and Joe Phillips, with me this evening. Stay tuned for Farage.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. Showers will clear south overnight, with clear spells in the north, leading to a frosty morning for Scotland, Northern Ireland and parts of northern England. But for southern parts of the UK, we'll see the continuation of some showers. Those showers are moving, associated with this occluded front, into central and then southern parts of the UK. So a slice of cloud, outbreaks of rain on and off, nothing particularly heavy or persistent. That will initially affect northern England, the Midlands, parts of East Anglia, but increasingly feeding into Wales and the southwest as the night wears on. Clearing skies then for the far north of England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, where temperatures will dip into the low single figures or even a touch below freezing in some spots. So a fairly widespread frost first thing tomorrow. Otherwise, plenty of bright spells for Scotland and Northern Ireland into northern England. Sunny spells breaking out as well as cloud and outbreaks of rain clear from the south. And then for much of England and Wales, it's a fine afternoon. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, it turns increasingly cloudy. Wet and windy weather pushes into the north and northwest of Scotland. Some heavy rain over the northwest Highlands, strengthening winds for the Northern Isles. Now, that wet and windy weather comes south during Thursday evening, increasingly feeding into central and then southern parts of Scotland, a few showers for Northern Ireland, and this area of cloud drifting its way southwards through the night as well. To the south of that, the far south of England, it stays clear through the night, and as a result, there'll be a touch of frost in places on Friday morning. But otherwise, across the UK, 3, 4, 5 Celsius typically, so generally frost-free. but it is a cloudy start to the day for the vast majority, and we'll see those outbreaks of rain continuing across central and southern Scotland into northern England, and then those rainy spells come south into central and eventually southern and southwestern parts by the end of Friday afternoon. To the north of that, a strengthening wind and feeling a bit colder, but for the weekend, high pressure builds. That will lead to a lot of fine and dry weather.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset, and I'm delighted to be joining GB News. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel, to get your wisdom.
Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday from 8 p.m. on GB News.
Britain's watching.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tonight on Farage, we have the first sit-down interview with the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. The straight-talking Home Secretary, GB News' Liam Halligan, conducted the interview. We show it in a minute here for the first time. When that's done, Jamie Balch, Olympic silver medalist at the 400 metres, joins me to talk about a life in sport, but perhaps even more importantly, about kids in care and adoption and what's going wrong in this country today. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening to you. The top story tonight on GB News. The Defence Secretary says Challenger 2 battle tanks could arrive in Ukraine by the spring. Ben Wallace made the comments during a visit to a British Army base in Dorset, where Ukrainian soldiers are training on standard British